Okay, so I wanted to talk today just a little bit about branches. Like our name comes from John 15, where Jesus said, "I'm the vine, you're the branches." And John 15:5 says, "I'm the vine, you're the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in them, they bear much fruit. And apart from me, you can do nothing." But this idea of Jesus talking to this church, these early followers, his first followers, and the context of this statement is plural. Like, one of our core values at Branches is community. Like, Jesus didn't say, "You're the branch. I'm the vine, you're the branch," right? He said, "I'm the vine, you are the branches." And the context of this is Jesus is not just growing a plant, a vine, but he is growing a vineyard. So I have this little winery here in Woodinville, so I work with some vineyards, and I'm so excited this year. I'm getting to buy some grapes from one of the most world-renowned vineyards in Washington. And so I get to work with this family who's owned it from the beginning. They planted it, like the guy's grandpa planted it, and I'm working with the grandson who's running it now. And I'm so honored. And a couple weeks ago I went out, and it was like snowy and everything over there. I had one day, I was like, I only have one day I can get out there, and it snowed the whole drive, and it was miserable and nerve-wracking. But I get out there, and I'm walking in the snowy vineyard, which is so beautiful, with him. And he's like, he doesn't take me out there and be like in this big open field with one vine, right? It's like, imagine that. And he's like, "Well, here it is, the vine." I'd be like, that's like, but this idea that Jesus said, "I'm the vine, you are the branches." He is growing a vineyard, not just a branch. In fact, community is what Jesus called his disciples into. And the first thing, in Matthew 4, in verse 18, he says, "As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, called Peter, and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. So, 'Come, follow me,' Jesus said, 'and I will send you out to fish for people.' And at once they left their nets and followed him." And verse 21 says, "Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. And they were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets, and Jesus called them. And immediately they left their boats and their father and followed him." This is actually a super special verse to me, just a tangent. But when I was in high school and I gave my life to the Lord, I was like 16, close to 17, and I went to like church camp, and gave my life to the Lord and came home. And the biggest difference in my life is I was so hungry for the Word. And I was reading the Bible. I was reading my Bible every day, and I was memorizing verses and stuff. And then months down the road, I'm doing this, and then I start thinking, man, I am doing this. I think I'm doing the right things. I'm saying prayers. I am reading my Bible. But God, I need something more. I need to hear you, really. If you're this living God, let me hear you now. And so I was on my knees next to my bed. I was like, "God, show me, give me something." And this in my head popped Matthew 4, 18 through 20. Now, I was like a young Christian, so I didn't really know the Bible. So I didn't know these verses. And I thought, okay, so I looked it up. And it was this paragraph here. And because it was a paragraph, I thought, this must be from God. Because if it were only if it were split up or something really odd, I'd be like, that couldn't have been from God. So because it was one paragraph, I was like, I think that God just spoke to me. And so this verse has always meant something to me, of Jesus calling us into community to become these fishers of people. But Jesus first calls his disciples into community. So, he calls these guys, these brothers, and they walked together, they lived together, they ate together, they did ministry together, they laughed together, they struggled together, they were persecuted together, they lived their whole life together. We live in a culture that values individualism very highly. Okay? Sadly, I think it's pretty easy to see that this high individualism in society has not led to more self-fulfillment or better life or stronger communities. Here, let me tell you, I think it often leads to a disconnectedness and loneliness. And here's why I'm thinking that. This is a study a couple years ago. It says that 52% of Americans report feeling lonely. 59% of Americans say they have a best friend, but 12 say they don't have any close friends. 57% of Americans report eating most meals alone. More than 80% of young people under the age of 18 report feeling lonely. If you know high schoolers, and like our high schools, they are so difficult. This is such a true statistic for young people. Britain, actually, so not America, but Britain has designated a ministry of loneliness to address the epidemic in their culture. And our Surgeon General has described loneliness and isolation as a serious health pandemic in America. The health equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Loneliness. 29% increased risk of heart disease, a 32% increased risk of stroke, a 50% increased risk of developing dementia in older adults. All from loneliness. So our culture's solution to this has been, well, let's be more connected. And the way we do this has been social media. And we are more connected than ever, but connection has not replaced true community. So we're more connected than ever, but statistics would show that we are lonelier than ever in our country. So you can put me on record as saying the world's attempts or our culture's attempts at creating true community have fallen short. So Jesus calls his disciples into this true community, though. And here's the outcome. Let me jump to the end in Acts 2. So this is, so Jesus spent a few years with these disciples, and he walked with them, and he taught them, and they were his apprentices. And then he was crucified and died on the cross, rose again, and he spent some more time with his disciples for a period of a handful of weeks, and then he ascended into heaven, and now we're looking at Acts 2, and this is a few years down the road from that, okay? And this is Acts 2, verse 42, and it says, "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers, and awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God, having favor with all the people, and the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved." This foundation of biblical community is this devotion that they had to one another and to Jesus. Their faith in Jesus, devotion to each other, were their defining characteristics. When you first read this, you might think, wow, they had everything. We read they had everything in common. But as you keep reading and you read letters from Paul or the epistles, they had a lot of disagreements. So much of Romans, Paul is writing to this church, this group of believers, telling them, begging, pleading with them to work it out with each other. It wasn't that they agreed on everything, but they agreed on these things, and they devoted themselves to that community. That when they disagreed, they didn't just leave. They didn't leave when they disagreed about politics or social constructs. That's how you say it, or budgets, or the volume of the music or the pastor's beard or their kids' program, but they devoted themselves to each other. They committed to practice over preference. Or sometimes I'll think of it as like conviction over convenience. But this practice to fellowship, generosity, gathering at the temple, breaking bread in homes, praising God together. We're super great at sharing our preferences and opinions. I know, right? Yeah. Was that what you think? Uh-huh. Yeah, like, I get voicemails every day for our little winery. I get a voicemail every single day from Google that says, if you have more reviews, it will help people find you better. Like every single day, I just gotta block that number. But have you ever left like a Yelp review or Google reviews? And we do this with churches. You know, I'm proud to say that Branches is a 5-star church. You know, I don't even. It's like my mom wrote a few. There's 3 reviews. One's my mom. We have like church shopping, and we tend to think of church as this exchange where we go to get something, and when we don't get what we want or what we're looking for, we just go somewhere else, like shop. Church shopping. This was not the model of the early church. The gathering was a group of people devoted to each other and practicing the teachings of Jesus with each other. We practice here. We gather here in this community so that we can practice, so that when we leave here, we know what to do. They practice agape love with each other. The focus was not to meet their own personal needs, but to meet the needs of the community. And the focus was not getting, but in giving. Our culture would say, if you don't focus on getting your own needs met, they will not be met. But look what happened here in this church. People gave as others needed, until there was no need among them. Like, I am so afraid of having my own needs met that I try to take what I can to meet those needs. But in this community that Jesus is growing, he says, your needs will be met by this community. And if you focus on meeting others' needs and generosity and giving and growing and loving and patience, you'll also receive that. There's a pastor I wrote over in New York that planted a church in New York City. He wrote this Acts 2 according to the gospel of preference. And he wrote this, he says, so he's rewriting this passage. He says, they studied the apostles' teaching when they had time. They went to fellowship when they could fit it in. They prayed when they needed something and got coffee together every now and then. They were content without and had low expectation for signs and wonders in their midst. They sometimes talked about generosity, but they kept their possessions to themselves. And 2 out of 5 Sundays, they came to corporate gatherings. They didn't invite people to their homes and rarely revealed their hearts. They were largely irrelevant to all the people, and occasionally someone was randomly saved. Harsh, right? When I read that, I was like, wow, that's like, man, you're mean. Like, you're not an encouraging pastor. But sadly, this is true of a lot of churches in America. I am so encouraged by you guys and the generosity here with the good neighbors, with the food, I don't even know what you call it, out front. And I've seen people, I tend to work at nights, I like working, and anyways, I see people come here and they'll take something from the food there, or I see people dropping off stuff all the time, and I'm so encouraged by that. But that's not like the norm. Why is it so hard for this Christian community? And I think the gist of it is that we've all been hurt in some way, and in community, in community, and even in Christian community. We all have like these scars or hurts or baggage and wounds that we bring into community with us. Maybe religious trauma. Do you watch The Office? Did anyone watch The Office? In the words of Michael Scott, fool me once. Oh wait, what's he say? Fool me once, strike one. Fool me twice, strike three. But that's how we get when it comes to being vulnerable ourselves, right? Like I've been hurt, once bit, twice shy. Our capacity for grace decreases as we suffer wounds, and especially wounds from within our community. And so we put up walls, like we safeguard our hearts, and we only let people get so close. I think another reason it's hard for this true community to exist is because often, like myself, I bring in these unrealistic expectations of a community, this idealism. I do some pre-marriage counseling with couples, and do this survey thing. And one of the categories that comes out in the end is idealistic distortion. It's called. So if you have you want low, you want to score low on that category. One time I had this couple, they scored like 10 out of 10 for idealistic distortion, which meant they came in and they said, we have never had an argument together, and we don't think we ever will because we are perfect. We are made for each other. This is the one, right? That marriage did not last. But we bring these expectations into community. Bonhoeffer, there's a new movie about him, which I haven't seen, but is on my short list that I want to watch. But he wrote in the book Life Together, he wrote, the person who loves their dream of community will destroy community, but the person who loves those around them will create community. The evolution of community often looks like this, like we're excited to meet new people. And this is me, I'm an extrovert. Maybe you're an introvert and you're less excited than me, but I love to meet new people. When I'm working at my winery in the tasting room, I just love meet. That's one of my favorite parts of the whole thing. That's one of the reasons I do it, to meet people. And it's so fun. Like last week I met this couple, this married couple, and they have been dancers in the Pacific Northwest Ballet for 17 years. But the guy, he was from Wisconsin, and I'm from Wisconsin. And so right away we're like, and he is like, are you from Wisconsin? Because I have a little Packer thing up in the winery. And so we started talking, we connected. We're like, what's your favorite Wisconsin beer? And like, you love the Packers? I love the Packers. My sister lives in Green Bay. Oh, my family. You went to college here? I was here. And like all these things. We had so much fun. It was so great. And we've been texting since. And so you meet this new people, new person. You find these things in common. You hit it off. And you have this mutual value or mutual interest, and that easily and quickly grows together. But eventually down the road, you will see differences. And potentially, these differences can be seen as an obstacle to growth in your relationship, or can cause friction. And most often what we do then is we just change communities. We start hanging out with different people. We church hop. This is what happens. My main mentor in my life, his name was Jerry Cook. He passed a handful of years ago, but in my ministry institute training, he talked about, as we were talking about missiology and church and mission and values, he said, before you start talking about your mission, your values, your core beliefs and stuff like that, he's like, you need to have this group of people decide that they are committed to each other. And from there, out of that commitment to each other, then you'll discover your values, your core beliefs. And I argued with him. Here I am he's like Yoda, and I am like Luke Skywalker. Not even a good comparison, because I'm way not as cool as Luke Skywalker. But I would argue with him and be like, no, you want to start with commonality. You want to start with people who share the same values as you, because it's going to go so much quicker and so much faster. And he's like, it won't work. And I'm like, no, it's gonna work. I mean, look at all these nonprofits or charities or agencies that all just gather around a cause, and how quickly how much you can do quick. And he's like, nope, that's not how Christian community works. That's not how Jesus did it. Think about it. When Jesus called those disciples, he called, when he lists the disciples, lists the 12 of them in Matthew, there's the two with little things about them. There was Simon, Simon the Zealot and Matthew the tax collector. These two people would have had nothing in common. Like Simon the Zealot would be on like a terrorist watch list in our country. He wanted to violently overthrow the Roman Empire. And then you have Matthew, who is this Jewish guy who basically left his faith and is working for the Roman Empire now. And these are two of the people that Jesus called. Now imagine sitting at dinner with these two people sitting next to each other every day. Like there was very little in common, but Jesus pulled them together into this community. The first century church then, at most, as we read this in Acts, there's a few hundred people, maybe 100. Jesus had this close 12 and some around that, and there's 100 to a few hundred people. But the impact that they had is the reason that we're here today. The hard part about community is that it only works if we are vulnerable. And there's this element of risk. And you can only experience the fullness of Jesus in community. But then in true community, you will be hurt. So it's also the path to finding healing and purpose, and joy and identity. I want to give you two pictures then of this community that Jesus is creating. First, a couple years ago, I had a dream. I have a dream. And I was in this place, this house. There's a bunch of people. We're all hanging out. I don't remember who the people were. And I don't remember why, but I was like going there. I had to take a shower. And so I'm looking for the bathroom in this house. Okay, this is like a crude. I'm sorry about this. Sorry. You'll never ask me back. But I'm looking for a shower in this house. Don't picture this. Don't try to picture this. But there's no bathrooms. And the showers were like in the middle of the living room. And I'm like, and there's no curtains. It's just a shower in the middle. And I'm like, okay, I go look in another. I'm looking all around. And this house had no showers. The showers were no bathrooms, no closed doors, just showers in the middle of the room. And I was like, I cannot be naked in front of people. All that shame. I could never do that. And I just had this picture of looking and looking and looking and not being able to do it. And I woke up and I was like sweating. I was like, man, I don't usually remember dreams. I'm like, God, is this from you? And maybe it was. Let me give you another picture. Something we talked about at Branches a few years ago. We went verse by verse through the book of Leviticus. Yeah, cliffhanger, right? That's like also where Bible reading plans go to die. But in Leviticus 4, the first few chapters is all about these sacrifices that you do, these sins. And chapter 4 talks about this. There was a sin offering. First it talks about priests or the whole community and specific sins. But then there's this any common person who sins against another. And the sacrifice that they would do was a goat. They have to bring a goat to the temple and sacrifice this goat. Now it's easy to read over that, and for my, most of my life thought, I'm just really glad that we don't have to do those sacrifices anymore. But now there's this idea that I have of walking this goat. If I ever write a book, which I have no intention of doing, it's going to be called Walking the Goat. Because think about this. Say you sin against another person in this room, and you have to take one of your goats and walk it through town, right past their house, to go bring it to the temple for this sacrifice. You can't hide it. You can't hide this goat. You can try to go at odd times or whatever, but goats are noisy and they're messy, and you just can't fake it. So here you are in front of this community, all the people you live around, and you have to walk this goat in front of all of them. It's this idea of confession, of bearing our souls. This is like the community, and remember Leviticus was God gave all these laws to Moses as they were wandering around this desert. And I often think of this as this is God like for 400 years, they were told they were worthless, they were less than humans, they were animals, and now this is God showing them who they are again. Like reminding them who he is and giving them their identity back, and then creating all these things and creating this community. This idea of walking the goat, that you are going to walk your goat and bare your soul and share your sin and not be full of shame, not be persecuted for it. Because, you're walking your goat one day, and the next day, guess who's walking their goat? Your neighbor, your friends, your family. And everybody in this community has these goats that they're just walking to this temple to sacrifice because they sinned against each other and there wasn't a shame in it. So this picture of walking the goat is God building this community of acceptance and forgiveness without shame and guilt. This is the community God is creating. So really quickly, what now? There's a song I heard. Came out like a few weeks ago. This guy, Drew Holcomb, and the Neighbors, already his band's name implies community. But they have a song that's called Brick by Brick, and this is how some of the lyrics says, "What if I believed it when you said you want to be around me? What if I could see that you've been here all along? And suddenly the story I told myself is unraveling. The more I'm in your company, the less I am alone." And then the chorus is, "Brick by brick, you're taking this wall apart. It took me years to build this fortress around my broken heart, but your patient hand goes stone by stone. Last night, pain can be a prison, but your love is making me a home." I think this is the picture, a great picture of this community that God is growing. It takes time, it can be hard. And just wrapping this up today, I encourage you, start somewhere, brick by brick, to tear down these walls that we've put up to protect ourselves. Let ourselves be vulnerable. I love that Jesus says he didn't come to call the righteous, but the sinners. So church might look less like a perfect group of sinless people and more like an AA meeting on Monday morning. Jesus taught in community. He was betrayed in community. He was abandoned by his community in order for us to find true communion with him and with each other. So let me pray. Jesus, I just thank you again for your great love, for your hand on our lives, and the example that you set, and that you took the first steps to draw us close to you, that you gave up your life that we could find ours. And so, Jesus, we just follow you. Help us to commit to loving each other the way that you have loved us, and may that be the example we set in our community and the world around us here in Woodinville and Seattle and Washington and America and to the ends of the earth, God. We just thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.